Noswaith dda. Good evening. I'm Richard Jones and I'm Chair of RCN Wales and Chair of the RCN Cwmtaf Morgannwg RCN branch. Thanks everyone for attending our National Hustings of 2021, which follows our 5 very successful regional hustings from right across Wales. Indeed, you have joined the hustings in your thousands to ask questions and listen to the debates from our politicians. And tonight, I would like you to meet our panelists. From Plaid Cymru, we have Rhyn ap Iorwerth. Good evening, Rhyn.
Good evening, Richard. Good evening, all.
From Conservative Party, we have Angela Burns, and good evening to you as well.
Good evening, Richard. Hi, Tracy. Nice to see my 2 opposers here, and hello to everybody out there.
Thank you. And from the Labour Party, we would like to welcome Eluned Morgan. Very nice to welcome you as well, Eluned.
Diolch yn fawr, Richard, a dwi'n edrych ymlaen at yr achlysur yma heno. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Okay, well, candidates can contribute in both English and Welsh. Audience members, if you do not speak Welsh, simultaneous translation is available when you join us on Zoom. You should see a button at the bottom of your screen that looks like a globe. If you click it and choose English, you will hear all remarks in English. For those of our audience watching on Facebook, we'll post the Zoom link so you can access translation. Now, each candidate will now have 1 minute to introduce themselves, and then we will go to the questions. So I'm going to start first with Rhyn, followed by Angela, and then Eluned. So Rhyn, you've got 1 minute to introduce yourself. Thank you, Rhyn. You're on mute, Rhyn.
Yes, will you give me an extra 5 seconds now after reaching for the mute?
No.
Listen, it's a pleasure to be here. Mae'n bleser go iawn I fod efo chi yma yn yr hustings. Heno ma Rhyn ydw I. Dwi'n sefyll dros Plaid Cymru yn Ynys Môn, ond fi ydi Llafarydd Plaid Cymru ar iechyd a gofal. Mae heno'n gyfle unwaith eto I ddeud diolch wrth bob un o'n chi am y gwaith da chi wedi bod yn ei wneud dros y flwyddyn diwetha, ond y diolch mwyaf dwi'n hollol grediniol a gallwn ni roi I chi ydi darparu ar gyfer chi a chleifion ar draws Cymru y math o wasanaeth iechyd a gofal yr ydych chi yn ei heiddi. Mae yna waith ryfeddol o'n blaenau ni I ail adeiladu, ond gadwch ni efo'n gilydd drafod heno ma yr hyn sy'n angen wneud, nid yn unig I godi'r gwasanaethau ar ei traed, ond I ddarparu gwasanaethau sydd yn well ac yn fwy canoliadwy ar gyfer y dyfodol. Felly mae'n braf bod yma a dwi'n edrych ymlaen am y sgwrs heno.
Da iawn, Rhyn, thank you very much. And you kept within the 1 minute. That's really good, thank you. Angela next.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm Angela Burns, and for the last 5 years, I have been the Shadow Minister for Health and Social Care. And it's been a portfolio that is like no other. It is quite extraordinary, the breadth that we ask our health professionals to cover and the responsibilities that we put on health boards and on individuals within the professions across health and social care, because we rely on them as human beings, as the population of Wales. We rely on you all so very much. And I'm very grateful for all that you have done and all you've continued to do while we fight through this pandemic. I just want to very quickly say that our manifesto, which I've put together on health and social care, focuses on 2 things. Prevention, let's try not to get sick, and then workforce. We need more of you, we need you in more places, and it's a desperate shame where we are today, and we have put forward very strong plans to address that issue as well.
Thank you very much, Angela. And Eluned, please. Thank you, Eluned.
Diolch yn fawr. Fi yw Lyneb Morgan, aelod seneddol tan yn ddiweddar, tan yr etholiad yma dros Gorllewin a Chanolbarth Cymru. I was, until recently, the Minister for Mental Health in the Welsh Government and also for Wellbeing and the Welsh language. I want to pay tribute to all of the incredible work that nurses have done during what is undoubtedly one of the most challenging times in the history of the NHS. I think that it's really important that we acknowledge the contribution of the nursing community, and we simply wouldn't have got through it without you. And I think that's why we were very perturbed by the Tory government's recent derisory offer of 1% for staff. So, you know, let's get political straight away. Certainly, we were the first country in Europe to legislate for safe staffing when we passed the Nursing Staffing Levels Act. We've kept the nursing bursary. We've increased significantly the amount of money we've spent on training nurses. But central for me, as the Minister for Mental Health, is to make sure that our workforce is happy, and especially during this challenging time. And that's why we've put significant funding into supporting nurses' mental health.
Thank you very much, Lyned. And thank you all candidates for that introduction. Now we will move to the questions. RCN Wales has asked members to write in with their questions before this evening. We'll also be allocating time to take questions from the floor, so to speak. There's a question function on the right-hand side of the screen. If you put your questions here, we will come to these later in the event. We also be monitoring Facebook questions, so feel free to pop a question on there if you're watching on our live stream. To go over a few formalities to our audience, if you're going to ask a question using the question function, please make sure that they are appropriate and do not direct questions just at one candidate, as we want to give all candidates a chance to speak and to respond. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, which will be read out by our excellent question master this evening, and that's going to be Tracy Lindsay. She's got a lovely smile there at the right-hand side of me. I will approach a candidate to answer the question, so please wait until I call your name. I will also let you know when 2 minutes is up, and I'll cut you off when you get up to 3 minutes. So here we go, Tracy. Can we have the first question, please?
Oh, thank you, Richard, and welcome, Aluned, Angela, and Reen. Great to see you all joining us tonight. Our first question really shouldn't come as a big surprise to the three of you. It's a month ago, the UK government recommended to the pay review body that nursing staff in England covered by Agenda for Change should receive a 1% pay rise. How would your party ensure nursing staff in Wales receive the fair and meaningful pay rise?
I think that's a very, very important question from our members, and all our members are listening tonight to your reply. So we're going to go straight to Reen for his response. Thank you, Reen.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. And yes, we would have expected that question, I think, this evening. If that announcement of the 1% pay increase had been made at any time, it would have felt like a real kick in the stomach to everybody that is so dedicated within our health and care system. The fact that that announcement came a year into a pandemic like no other, into a period when nurses had worked in such a selfless way on the front line of a global pandemic that was claiming so many lives, that was a risk to the well-being of all of them, was a most deep insult. Of course, we must reject any notion that nurses should in effect receive a pay cut at the end of this year, I'm clear in my mind that we are at a time where we have seen more than 10% cut off the pay of nurses over the period of a decade. We should be looking to restore that. The RCN looks at the figure of 12.5%, and absolutely I agree with that figure as the point we need to get back to. And UK government should be making sure that that money is available now, and the public expect nothing less. In Wales, we should, of course, be following the advice of the pay review body. And of course, we want, I hope and trust that the pay review body will make a pay offer that will be fair and will reward nurses as they should be rewarded. It has been an insult, and we will be on the side of nurses in government.
Thank you very much, Rain. And now Angela.
Yes, thank you for that question, Richard. Only a few weeks ago, you and I were at the opposite ends of a Zoom, just like this, and I made it absolutely crystal clear then, and I make it crystal clear again. The Welsh Conservatives have said that if we were to form the next Government of Wales, we will adhere to the pay review body's recommendations, whatever they are. But you'll also recall that I went on to talk about the importance of Agenda for Change, how Agenda for Change, when implemented all that decade ago, has actually done an awful lot to raise the lower paid people, the bands 1 to 4, hugely. People, porters, secretaries, some other professionals, but that nursing, which really starts at band 5 and above, has actually never really had that big boost that it needs. And what I've discussed, and we would talk about with the Royal College of Nursing, is whether or not, in fact, the nursing as a profession should be sitting within that Agenda for Change portfolio, or whether, like doctors, there should be a separate nursing contract, because we do need to do this pump prime and do that leap. But in the short term, we would be implementing in full whatever the pay review body said. And although it's wonderful to have all these bonuses and things like that, it's not the answer, because we need to have a good basic standard of pay. And a £500 bonus, say this year, is lovely, but it doesn't actually help next year or the year after. We need to embed those increases. We will do that. What my colleagues in England do is entirely up to my colleagues in England. But we've been very clear. We support nursing. We will give the pay review bodies pay rise, whatever that may be.
Well, thank you for that, Angela. And before I bring Elena in, just to tell you that the nursing family actually starts at band 2. So it's not just band 5, it's from band 2 upwards. So that's really important for our members. Elena?
Well, diolch yn fawr iawn. I also think, like Reen, that it was a huge insult in the middle of a pandemic to be giving that kind of suggestion that would be an increase. Of course, we are a devolved organisation in Wales. We have a devolved government, and we can make our own decisions on these things. And I'm very pleased that our whole ethos and our approach is based on what Aneurin Bevan set out in the beginning. It's not marketisation. It's not competition within the NHS. And we value the people who work in our NHS. And that's why, whilst we're waiting for that pay review, we wanted to acknowledge the incredible work has been done by giving that special bonus of £735 to all 220,000 staff in the NHS. And that was on top of the £500 bonus we gave to care workers. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that the interrelationship, in your video, you talked about the fact that actually we could be doing a lot more care at home. Well, if we're going to be doing that, we need to make sure we're supporting those care workers as well. And everybody knows that they need more support and better funding as well. We also have paid we're paying the real living wage of £9.50 an hour to everybody who's working in the NHS. I think this is really important because nurses don't work in isolation. They work with cleaners and porters, and my God, we've learned to appreciate them during this crisis. I'm sure it's really important that we underline that. But we've also put those annual increases in place for funding, additional support for health and education. We've recruited record numbers of nurses, but we also will wait for that pay review body to make those recommendations. We've listened to the Royal College of Nursing as the Welsh Labour government, and we've made representations to the pay review body to make sure and to confirm that there is no arbitrary cap in Wales and that we will be respecting what comes out of that review.
Thank you very much, all three of you. The one thing that I would say to you, Eluned, is that whilst we welcome that additional monies, what we want is a consolidated pay increase. So that increase actually increases year on year. That is so very important for our members. So thank you all for answering that question. And we'll go to our Tracy for our next question.
Thank you, Richard. The second question is, do you support extending Section 25B of the Nurse Staffing Levels Act 2016 to inpatient mental health wards and community nursing?
Okay, that is something that's very dear to our hearts in Wales. We were the first country in Europe to introduce the Nurse Staffing Act. And I know that lots of politicians in Wales have actually supported us up until this time. So I'll go now to Angela to ask her to be the first to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, Tracy, the short answer is yes. We do support that. And, you know, before Eleanor tries to cover the Welsh Government in glory, can I point out that actually this is down to the tenacity of Kirsty Williams, and I think we should all pay her a tribute before getting this through and onto the statute books. It's really important, and I think that it will help to address so many other things as well if we can get these levels at the right level for all of the different areas. And I would like to see it extended even more than the areas that you speak of, because what it will do is it'll actually force that really holistic review of the workforce, and that's what we desperately need. You know, I'm always staggered whenever I meet Lisa and she tells me about how many hours a year nurses give to us for free. And I think the latest number was something like 972 person years, which are just unpaid, which are because nurses feel a responsibility, an obligation, a sense of duty, and a sense of pride in what they do. And they're working under immense pressures. And, you know, Richard, if I may just very quickly say that I had cause to be in hospital for an awfully long time a few years ago. And I was really struck by one thing in particular, that when it came around to nurses, for example, trying to give a opioid-based medicine to somebody in desperate pain, that person would often have to wait because the nurse didn't have another nurse to help her or him sign it off. And they had to scrabble off to another ward and find somebody. You know, that breaks every sort of ethos of safe staff levels, does it not? And so that is the kind of thing that really drives us. We've seen it, many of us, you know, we have many stories, I'm sure we all have, but it's that kind of thing we've got to stop. We've got to deliver, you know, better care for our patients because we can get to them quickly because there's enough of us. And we've got to make sure that we're clinically safe and nurses are not under those massive pressures. So Tracy, a long answer again to my very short first answer, the answer to your question is yes.
Thank you very much, Angela. Eluned.
Thanks very much. And I'm not going to try and take any credit away from Kirsty Williams. I pay tribute to her for, as you say, that tenacious work that she did. And while I'm on that, I want to pay tribute to you as well, Angela, because we're all very, very sorry to see Angela leaving the Senedd. I must say, you see, we can be friends across different political parties, and she has done an immense amount of work in this field. So thank you, Angela, for that. But also, yes, I would just like to confirm that, of course, we have already seen an extension to pediatric inpatient wards, and we have made that commitment to keep the situation under review. Certainly, when it comes to sections 24B and 25C, that mandate to calculate and maintain nursing staffing levels is something that we have committed to continue under review. I think you spoke specifically about mental health, and I would like to underline our commitment to that as well. What we do know, and I'm sure there'll be a question on this later, but is mental health issues are really coming up the agenda very, very quickly, and we need to take that very seriously. And there are some very acute problems, but there are also low level problems, and maybe you don't need the intensity in those places.
Thank you, Elena. I just want to build on that a little bit before I come to Reen, because during this pandemic, we have seen such an increase in mental health issues, not only within families, but within health frontline staff. It is so important that we actually deliver that for our members and for the families across Wales. So thank you for that commitment, Elena. Reen?
Yeah, and it would be nice to have some questions, hopefully, on mental health as well this evening, so we can look at that issue in more depth. A principle was not just accepted but embraced with the passing of that piece of legislation, which now we can look back on it, even though there was lots of political debate at the time. We can look back on it as a principle that is about common sense more than anything, that if you get your staffing levels right, you lead to better outcomes for your patients in terms of your mortality rates and the care given to patients. And you also make sure that you are able to look after the workforce and the well-being of the workforce, retention of workforce. Nurses will always be under pressure, but they should not be under pressure because of the understaffing of parts of health and care. In short, yes, absolutely, we need to extend the provisions of that legislation, pediatrics as well as mental health and community nursing. This is a principle that applies wherever you look across health and care. So we should be looking with urgency to make sure that we are able to ensure that all parts of our public services have staffing levels that are needed for patient safety and the well-being of the staff themselves.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your most positive responses on that question. So back to Tracy for the next one.
Thanks, Richard. Reen, you getting your wish. Our next question is about mental health. If you were to form the next Welsh Government, what does the future of mental health services look like in Wales?
Okay, so I'm going to go straight to Elena on this one.
Great, thanks very much. Well, as you know, I was appointed, I think probably as one of the first cabinet posts in the world to really focus specifically on mental health, because there is an understanding that there was an issue before. This is not something that's new to the Welsh Government. We've got a 10-year strategy in place. I'm sure you'll be aware that we spend more money on mental health than any other aspects within the NHS, about 11% of our budget, about £780 million a year. So what's key now is that we're spending it in the right place. And one of the things that we know is that if you intervene early, you are less likely to see those problems develop and become more complex. So we're going to be refocusing the attention on early intervention, but also on children and young people. We know that 80% of mental health issues start when people are children and young people. So we've got a wholesale reform of our curriculum to make sure that well-being is central to everything we do there. We have an in-house, in-school CAM service, which is being which is being rolled out, but also we've got early help and enhanced support when it comes to care in the community for young people. On top of that, one of the things that we've put in place is a new social prescribing framework. That's a commitment in our manifesto, because we've got to recognise not all mental health issues are medical, and we tend to over-medicalise some of these things. There's not many people who haven't suffered anxiety during this pandemic in some form or another. But I'd just like to refer specifically to the mental health of people working in the health sector, because I think the pressure that people have been under over the past year is bound to have an impact. It's had an impact during this time, which is why we've put an extra £1 million into supporting people who work in the sector, Health for Health Professionals. I'm told that it's a very good programme. I've spoken to people on the programme. But also, I think what's important is that we understand that there is likely to be a kind of post-traumatic impact for many people, which may not present itself immediately. And so keeping that support in place, not pulling it away once we finish the pandemic, is absolutely crucial. And that's what we've learned from other experiences here.
Okay, thank you, Eluned. Reen?
Thanks for the question. We're in a better place than we were a few years ago in terms of, we are talking about mental health within society. We're talking about mental health, but there's such a long way to go. You'll remember early in the pandemic, 1,700 patients in the north of Wales in the Betsy Cadwaladr area were told, "Oh, we've got a pandemic on. We're going to take you off the mental health waiting lists now. Go to the back of the queue. Come back when this is all over." Now, the health board put their hands up and said, that was a mistake, it shouldn't have happened. But the fact that it did happen and that it was considered somehow that mental health could be dealt with tomorrow tells us, doesn't it, how much more work there is to do. The kind of focus that I would like to give mental health is this. We want to see absolutely that mental health is treated in every way as physical health problems are. I want a service where the preventable in mental health terms is seen as important as the preventable in physical health. And I want to see the treatment of mental health early diagnosis being seen as important as early diagnosis with a cancer or with physical illnesses. All of them perhaps come together in one particular policy that I'll mention, which is our pledge to establish a network of youth well-being hubs throughout Wales, where young people can pop in off the streets who aren't unwell enough to need immediate medical intervention with mental health, but need support, need help with their well-being in order to stop a small problem developing into something that really affects their lives deeply. That is the kind of attitude that I want Welsh Government to show towards mental health, that for young people, but right across the board, of course.
Thank you very much, Reen. And Angela?
Yes, I mean, thank you. It's such an important area, and it's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that people think that physical health and mental health are two separate things. I mean, they're not. It's all part of us, our bodies, our whole well-being is all about all of us, all of our bits working together, mind, soul, body, the whole package. And it's really good to see that we are beginning to pull that together. But within health boards, there is still too much of a division. I remember sitting in the health committee and being sort of absolutely shocked to hear that if somebody has a need for, let's say that they're a mental health patient and they need to have a leg because they're in a wheelchair and they need to have their leg set, then there's this fight over budgets because they're a mental health patient, and they're not. They're just a patient. And you can have a mental health issue and you can have a broken leg and all the other things. So I think it's really important that we start pulling it together, and that's one of our big drives. I totally agree with Eleanor, though, that we need to be very careful, particularly as a result of this pandemic, that we do not over-medicalise some of this. There's a lot of low-level anxiety and some despair, and there are better ways of treating that than going, right, we have to put everybody into this particular bracket. So I think we've got to extend our understanding and definition of mental health, and that it starts with that low level anxiety all the way through to serious sort of psychological issues. But we also have to do some tangible things. So one of the first tangible things we would do is actually to have a new Mental Health Act. There's a lot of the mental health legislation that's in place. What we can and cannot do for people is very outdated, and it has to be dragged into the 21st century. We would have a mental health review. We would look at the way the budgets talk, because let's be clear, money talks. And if you have money in the right places, and you really have the money following the patient, following the person, then as I said earlier, it doesn't matter what the issue is that that person is facing. I think that I'm not quite sure which of my colleagues here said it, but we've got to be very cognizant of the mental health pressure that so many of our frontline workers are under, whether they are nurses, doctors, police, whoever it is. There's been an awful lot going on, and we've got to be able to put in very, very clear programs. But we've got to get down to some nitty gritty. We have plans for some mental health crisis centres to be implemented throughout Wales, where people can turn up. And also, Reen touched on it, we've got to look after the children. Start young, give people a robust, strong mental health, good sense of their well-being, and we're going to be in with a much better chance of preserving the mental health of the nation.
Thank you all very much. I just want to make one comment, really, because I think that what all three of you are actually saying is very laudable. But for me, we do need a workforce strategy so that we can actually get the right people in the right place to support the patients and to support the staff. And as far as nursing is concerned, I think we need far more training places on education programs for mental health and learning disability nurses as well going forward. So thank you very much for your answers there. And Tracy, next question, please.
Thank you, Richard. Question 4 is, there's a lot of focus on the NHS and hospitals, and I'm sure we agree that that's very important. But the NHS cannot function without social care. If you are in the next Welsh government, what are your priorities and proposals for the reform of social care in Wales?
Okay, Reen.
Thank you for the question. This is at the heart of Plaid Cymru plans for government. Going back prior to the pandemic, the year and a half before the pandemic, Plaid Cymru set up a care commission that looked into this issue. How do we make sure that we give social care the attention and the funding and the parity that it needs? And how do we tie it in closer to health? As a result of that work, we announced before the pandemic that we want to establish a national health and care service for Wales. Now, it doesn't mean widespread reorganisation. It doesn't mean reorganising the health boards and local authorities. What it does mean is providing a clear framework for the delivery of health throughout Wales, for the delivery of care, and crucially, for delivering together integration of the delivery of health and care. Now, we said that before the pandemic. Everything that I have seen over the past 13, 14 months now has shown how right we were to make that call, because we have come to appreciate social care over the recent months like we have never done before. And the questioner puts it perfectly. The NHS health bit cannot perform, cannot survive without a rock-solid social care system. We want to integrate the two, and that means integrating terms and conditions for staffing, creating new career paths for nurses through social care, through hospitals and the community. There's a hugely exciting new landscape for health and care under a Plaid Cymru government that is a top priority if I become Minister for Health and Care.
Thank you very much, Reen. Angela?
Yeah, this is probably one of the most important subjects that any incoming government needs to deal with. And, you know, let's be really clear, this is not going to be magic wandland. We're in a terrible situation as far as the provision of care services goes. We have a very fragile residential care market, a very fragile market that the Health and Social Care Committee have been pointing out to the Welsh Government for the past 5 years and probably more. We have a lack of staff, a lack of trained staff, and a staff who don't feel that they are truly valued, don't feel that they're paid very well, and don't see a career progression in front of them. We have a sector where nurses who are in that sector are not paid the same parity as their colleagues in secondary care, which is nonsense. You know, you're a nurse, and it doesn't matter where your patient is that you're looking after. So there's a whole raft of things that have to be addressed, and we are, you know, very, very aware and alive to that issue. And you know, you made the comment, the NHS can't survive without care. Actually, I don't think we can all survive without care. It's one of the ultimate services that we can offer to give people in there who are more vulnerable, you know, older people who have a degree of disability, whatever it may be, that choice, and that's what care does. We would have, and we have in our manifesto, pledged a number of things. One, that we will put in and make the whole care sector part of our recruit, retain, retrain strategy. And I do hope we're going to talk about workforce later, because I really want to talk about this subject. We will put a social care, a chief social care officer for Wales, a £15 million care innovation fund, start pooling those budgets because people follow the money, and to make it really work. And above all, to level up that playing field so that wherever you're nursing or wherever you are offering care, at somebody's home, in a residential care, you're nursing in a hospital, you're nursing in a care home, you have parity, equality of prospects, employment and salary. You know, there's an awful lot of other things I can talk about, but I'm not sure where I am on my couple of minutes. All of occupational therapists, wraparound care, making it really work. But we have some very strong plans.
Thank you very much, Angela. Eluned?
Diolch yn fawr, thank you. Well, like both Rina and Angela, I think this pandemic has underlined how important the care sector is for our communities. And certainly we've got to acknowledge the fact we have an aging population. This issue is not going away. This is an issue that absolutely needs to be addressed. I guess the issue really is, as a Labour government, we don't want to make promises that we can't keep. So we are very keen to see a much better integration between care and health. The problem is we don't have a bottomless pit. Care is very, very expensive. And what we don't want to do as a government is to put money in and then watch the Tory government in Westminster take it back out through the benefit system, because there is an interrelationship between those two. And so until we see the colour of the money and the structure and the form that they are intending to introduce in England, it's going to be very difficult for us. Now, we've given them a lot of time. We were promised this by Boris Johnson. We still haven't seen it. If they don't come up with something, of course, we're going to have to address the issue ourselves. But it will be a lot more complicated if we go our own way without knowing what the interrelationship with that benefit system will be. We have made it clear that we will pay the living wage to all care workers in Wales. We have also made it clear that there is a cap on the payments that you have to pay for home care in Wales of £100 a week. That doesn't exist in England. There is no cap on it. And so you could be facing thousands of pounds worth of bills that you're not confronted by in Wales. Certainly, one of the things, like Angela, we would introduce a chief social care officer for Wales, and we would introduce a national social care framework so that we know there is a better consistency across Wales, because that's part of the problem. We want a fair commissioning, fair workforce conditions, making sure that we get a better balance between private and public and the charity sector. So all of these things are absolutely crucial. We recognise that we need to go further. but we're waiting for that announcement from the UK government, because otherwise we'll be putting money in and we'll watch that money being taken from the people we're trying to help by the Tory government in Westminster through the benefit system.
Yes,
We
it's
can't do
fallacy.
that.
Yeah, can I just say before we move on to the next question, I am so old, I've been in the NHS for 50 years, and I have to tell you that this was a problem when I started my career, and it certainly remains a problem today. It's something that I think whoever's in government has to fix for society going forward. Taking on Angela's point about fair remuneration for nurses wherever they work, I think that is so important, and terms and conditions that are fair and equitable across the board are really, really important as well. And this is for the protection of our people in care homes. This is for the support of them and their families, and they deserve a high standard of care delivery as well. Thank you all very much for your answers. Tracy, next question.
Thank you, Richard. Question 5 is, services available to children with a learning disability and their families across Wales are diverse and complex, and it's a postcode lottery. There is a need to improve joint working across health, care, and education. How would your party improve services for children and young people with a learning disability to ensure that all children in Wales reach their full potential in society?
Thank you very much. I think that's an extremely important question, and I'm going to come to Angela first on that one.
Yeah, and I hate to mention this horrendous couple of words, structural reform. But, you know, Tracy, that is actually the fact of the matter. I have watched, and I've been a party to, so many turf wars where constituents have contacted me and, you know, they need help for their child who's got additional learning needs, whatever they might be and however severe they are. And it ends up being a punch-up, either between education and care, or care and health, or between all three if you're supremely unlucky. And it's about people protecting their budgets, about protecting their ability to spend. Health, I have to say, are very, very much the dominant force in this, and they hang on to the purse strings very, very tightly. And until we actually devise a system where the money follows the person and goes with the person, the money becomes secondary, whose it is, what budget it is, this is going to be a very difficult one to really crack well. In terms of the actual services that are out there, they are very much a postcode lottery. Some health boards, some educational services, some county councils have really got to grips with what is needed. But you know what the other thing comes back down to? Workforce. You know, I think we have something like 231 educational psychologists in the whole of Wales doing so much. Speech and language therapists, you know, where are they? They're almost as rare as hen's teeth. We do not have enough. And, you know, Richard, I'm going to say it again, I hope we're going to talk about workforce, because, you know, somebody mentioned workforce strategy, and I want to be crystal clear. There is no workforce strategy until we get our workforce, the right numbers of people with the right training and in the right place. We cannot address an awful lot of these issues successfully. We can go some way, but that's what we've got to get sorted first, because ultimately health and care is a people business, and that's what we need in place.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. Before I go to Senedd, I have to tell you that throughout the whole of Wales, we have one nurse consultant in learning disability. One nurse consultant. Senedd, thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, we recognise that there was an issue in relation to additional learning needs, and my understanding is about 20% of the population has some kind of additional learning need. Yeah. And therefore it is clear that we need to take this matter very seriously and understand that it's not a small issue. This affects a huge number of people. That's why we brought in the Additional Learning Needs Act to try and address some of these issues, to try and bring some of these things together, because there was an acknowledgement that things were too separate and that things need to be far more integrated. We've also introduced, or will be introducing, a statutory code of practice on autism, and I think that's something probably worth underlining as well, that actually we need to get people to understand the different needs for people who are on that spectrum. But I think also we could learn lessons from what we're doing in relation to mental health, and that is putting that early help and enhanced support in very early on in the system. Because what happens very often is that people are bounced around the system, as Angela suggested, and they go from pillar to post and nobody holds on to them. Now, what we're doing in mental health, and we're following the Gwent model here, there is a group that comes together representing local communities, health boards, the local councils, bringing them all together. And somebody has to actually volunteer, stick their hand up, and the intention is to hold on to them, not to pass them on, but to hold on to them and to support them. And it's a real structural change, it's a mental change, it's a cultural change that needs to happen, and it won't happen overnight, but it has happened in Gwent. We're now rolling that out in relation to mental health, and there's no reason why that model couldn't be used as the model in relation to additional learning needs as well.
Thank you very much, Senedd. Rhyn?
Diolch am y cwestiwn, mi ofynwyd y cwestiwn yn Gymraeg, felly mi na i ateb o'n Gymraeg neu ar y sgrin o ymlaen ni yn fan hyn. Dwi am ganolbwyntio ar weithlu yn benodol os y cae. Dwi'n gwybod faint o siom oedd na dros y blynyddoedd diwetha pan gwtogwyd ar nifer y llefydd hyfforddiant ar gyfer nyrsys yn y maes yma'n benodol ym Mhrifysgol Bangor. Mi fyddai'n siarad efo myfyrwyr ar y pryd oedd yn teimlo bod na faes yn fan hyn lle dyn ni angen buddsoddi ynddo fo, lle mae angen cynllunio ar gyfer cynyddu gweithle ynddo fo, ond be oedden ni'n ei weld oedd cyfyngiad pellach ar faint o bobl oedd yn cael ei hyfforddi. Mae hwn yn enghraifft dda iawn o pam bod angen llywodraeth sydd â chynllun clir ar gyfer y gweithlu, a bod y cynllun hwnnw yn darparu y llefydd wedi comisiynu ar gyfer nyrsys ag eraill o fewn y gweithlu iechyd fydd ei angen ar gyfer y blynyddoedd i ddod. Un o'r rhesymau pam bod yna'r loteri cod post ar draws Cymru ydy bod yna y diffyg yma o staff yn dod drwy'r system sydd yn gallu darparu'r gwaith. Mae'n rhaid i ni gael strategaeth gweithlu sydd yn darparu niferoedd efo'r sgiliau cywir mwyn i ni allu cael gwasanaeth cyfartal ar draws Cymru. Ac dydy o ddim yn fater hawdd wrth gwrs, ond mi yn un o'r pethau dwi'n benderfynol o fynd i'r afael oherwydd mae'r myfyrwyr eu hunain wedi deud wrtha ni, does na ddim digon ohono ni. A maen nhw'n gwybod, ond i bai bod yna fwy yn dod drwy'r system, mae parhau bydd y trafferthion yma mewn gwahanol ran o Gymru.
Thank you very much, Rhyn. And that was a really important question. And thank you all for your responses. Tracy?
Thank you. Our next question, Angela, is one that you sort of tapped into earlier when you asked about workforce and planning. Many nurses, as we all know, are burnt out and they're thinking about leaving the NHS. How do you propose to encourage nurses to actually stay in the profession?
Okay, really, really important question. And we're going to go to Senedd first on that one. Thank you, Senedd.
Diolch yn fawr. Well, I remember learning a few years ago that there were as many nurses, qualified nurses in Wales who weren't working as there were working. I don't know if that's still the case, but it really shocked me to the core to understand how many were leaving the profession. And there's usually a reason for that. And it's It was, I think, partly because they weren't being paid enough, and we hope that that's increased and improved over the years, but obviously we need to address that issue as well. But also the kind of pressures they've been under this year. Everybody will understand that there's a real danger that we'll reach burnout with some of these people. And that's why we do, I think, when we're going to be rebuilding and restructuring now after COVID, we do need to give some space for nurses to catch their breath. And clearly there is a huge backlog that we need to address in relation to waiting lists. But if we can't keep nurses in their jobs, then we won't be able to address that backlog. So I think it's really important that we don't switch directly and quickly into this. We need to give a little bit of space for people to recover and then address. And so the other point, of course, is that we need to make sure that we're recruiting enough people in relation to, oh, it's nice, isn't it? A cup of tea coming in.
I wish I had one.
Hello. So he's a GP, so he's just come back now, so he understands the medical profession far more than I do. But I do think that the other issue, of course, is that we've got to recruit more, and that's why we kept the nursing bursary. That has made a huge difference in Wales compared to England. We've got different mechanisms now to recruit people, doing it through the apprenticeship system and things. I think Hywel Dda have got some great models, because what we want is to keep people locally. I think it's opportunities to bring people in, perhaps when they're slightly more mature, if they're interested in doing that. It's keeping them in their communities. That is absolutely central to what we need to do. So more disparate ways of bringing people into the profession. And it's great to hear, I've spent a lot of days in the car recently going to campaign, and there's constant adverts to try and recruit people to come into the nursing profession. So, you know, things are happening. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Is just to make sure we recruit far more nurses, which will take the pressure off the ones who are currently there.
Yeah, thank you for that, Eluned. I mean, one of the statistics are that there are only 77 training places for learning disability nurses in Wales. I mean, that needs to be increased significantly in order that we can actually deliver the care that we require for our patients. Thank you, Eluned. Rhyn?
I think retention is as important as bringing new people into the profession. I think that's goes without saying. And I think the answers that we are looking at are across a number of different levels. We've got to make sure that the pressure on nurses now is sustainable, and that means extending the legislation on staffing levels, for example. It means having that workforce plan that brings enough people into the system. It means making sure that we are attracting new staff, as we've heard. That takes the pressure off more experienced workers. I remember working actually with the RCN to persuade Welsh Government to keep the bursary going. And yes, I was grateful that Welsh Government did keep it going, but I think we had to work harder than we ought to have done to keep that bursary going. We've got to create a sustainable health and care service. We've got to bring in more flexible working, which again plays into the agenda of taking pressure off nurses, especially now after the year that we have had. And of course, we have to ensure that pay is appropriate and that nurses feel respected through their pay packets, as well as being respected for the work that they are doing in terms of government attitude towards them. Nurses are, incredibly dedicated people, and you nurses, listening this evening, you don't spend your careers looking for a way out. Nurses want to nurse, but nurses are humans at the end of the day, and unless we can provide working environments with the adequate training, with the adequate support, that makes it possible for nurses to keep that flame burning, we are going to be losing staff, and we can't afford to lose good nurses.
Thank you, Rhyn. And Angela?
Yeah, Thanks very much for the question, Tracy. This is an issue that absolutely frustrates me beyond all belief. I mean, let me be clear. Let's set the pandemic to one side for a moment. That's just the last year. Welsh Government have seen this bus coming down the road for the last 5 years. And instead of jumping out of the way, they have just stood there and basically let the bus roll them over. We do not have enough staff. Now, with the greatest of respect, you know, when somebody says that, they're probably not going to be very respectful at all, but with the greatest of respect to both Reen and to Eleanor, you know, I heard lots of good words, but what are we actually going to do about it? So one of the things we're going to do about it is start our nursing apprenticeship scheme. Day one, that's what we will do. We will pull in HE and FE. We are looking to increase our nursing numbers radically. We have plans on how to do that. We have costed it. We have talked to all sorts of people about it. And essentially, we want to open up nursing, because nursing is a career for everybody. And it's a career for people who don't at the moment know it's a career for them. They don't think that they're bright enough. They don't think they've got the opportunity or the money. We have a very clear plan. We know how much it's going to cost us. £17 million will produce, according to the health NHS employers figures, their own figures, 500 nurses at the end of this process. We will bring people in from GCSE. We will encourage them. We will pay for them. We will support them. It's an earn as you learn. It will fill up bands 1 to 4 and then start trickling up. We will then try and move people through the whole apprenticeship scheme into degrees, into nursing. Why is this important? To fill in from the very, very bottom and bring people forward. One, you get people that you don't normally tap into. Secondly, as you fill in those lower bands, you start freeing up the upper bands to do things like CPD. How many nurses have told me that they haven't got the chance to do CPD? We're talking about not having enough learning disability nurses, but you need to go and specialise in that. People aren't free enough to specialise. They don't have time for on-job training. We can actually then start freeing up some of the other nurses who've got more experience so that they can go and specialise and go where they want. Why is this so important? I'm going to take Hywel Dda as one example. Something like 30% of the district nursing workforce is due to retire and has started retiring. You know, we're not filling in at the bottom, and we need hard, clear progress. And I just want to end on one other note. I find it beyond extraordinary that healthcare and HEIW rather, you know, have been tasked to produce a workforce strategy, a proper, clear, detailed, day in, day out, where are we going to have people, how many training places in every single discipline. Has it appeared? No. Have we challenged the minister? Yes. Is it anywhere on the horizon? No. You know, we've got to take action. The NHS is above all a people business. We're serving people and we need people to do it. And it's not rocket science. This is solvable. We have the talent in Wales, but we don't have the opportunity. And that's what we need to create.
Thank you very much, Angela. I need to go to Eluned now because I know Eluned needs to go. And thank you very much for your contribution this evening, Eluned. Do you want to say something before you leave?
No, I'm just extremely sorry that I have to leave. I'm so sorry. I've somehow been double booked. I didn't realize it was an hour and a half. So I've got another Hustings starting 2 minutes ago. So I'm really, really sorry. But can I just thank you so much for this evening? I found it really beneficial, and clearly we will continue to listen to the RCN and its members, but just a final thank you for all the incredible work that you've done this year. It really is appreciated, not just by government, but certainly by all the public across Wales. We're not out of the pandemic yet, but certainly you have done amazing efforts to really try and save as many as the Welsh public as we possibly can. And you've done a terrific job. So diolch yn fawr iawn I chi.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
Thank you very
Eleanor.
much for your contribution this evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Tracy, next question.
Thank you, Richard. Our next question is, how would you ensure investment in early intervention and prevention services to address health inequalities in Wales?
And I'm going to go to Reen with that one first of all.
Early intervention, how early do you want to go? I mean, let's go early into the preventative as well, shall we? Intervention is before the illness happens. Surely that's the best intervention. It's in creating healthy lives, healthy communities, and trying to stave off illness, both physical and mental. And I realise that that is perhaps the biggest challenge that I would face as a health minister, because at the heart of our plans for a new health and care service for Wales is a investment like never before in and a focus like never before on the preventative agenda. Angela will have heard me say this many times by now in Hustings, but to portray the kind of vision that I have, it's to say that I would like us to be in a place where I'd like to be able to spend health budgets on football pitches. That's how sustainable I would like the whole landscape to be, that we invest in keeping people healthy as we do in treating the health problems themselves. I think we have to be innovative in the way that we spend money within the health service and across the different government departments. We have to ensure that housing is playing its part in creating a healthier society, that other measures such as preschool meals, all those issues on getting rid of health inequalities come together. But we also have to be willing to look for ways of bringing funding in and changing behaviours. For example, our party was ahead of the game on a fizzy drinks levy, sugary drinks levy, because we were laughed at in the Senedd for wanting that, and now it's the mainstream idea. We think we should have the same for unhealthy foods as well, and I'd like to investigate that. But when we have that in place, we can look at the preventative and early intervention in a new way. And when people do start to show symptoms, absolutely, we need to have diagnostic centres rolled out at a faster pace than they currently are. And all of this builds a system that takes pressure off the really expensive end. The expensive treatments in hospitals that will always become more and more innovative, but more and more expensive as well. So let's spend money wisely, as much of it as we can within the health spending envelopes, and look for innovative ways of bringing money in at the same time.
Thank you, Reen, very much. Angela?
Yes, thank you. And I think that actually population health is key. I said at the very beginning of all of this that our manifesto was centered around two very strong pillars: workforce and prevention. Prevention is better than cure. So I think we have to look at this from a number of different perspectives. So we've got health and social care, and that is about having more workforce because we can carry out more education, we can do more preventative, we can hold people's hands at a much earlier stage and help the vulnerable to, if you like, negotiate their way through to a better place. We need that parity between physical and mental health, but we need to increase the spending on mental health and well-being. We need to see those key delivery plans on things like obesity, on smoking. We need the Clean Air Act, and that's in our manifesto. The Clean Air Act will make a big difference to people's outcomes, and it's really important we get that on the statute books. Labour promised it, the government promised it, never delivered it. We've made it really clear it will be within our 100 days. But we've also got to look at this from the educational perspective, and Reen's touched on that. And Reen has been a really powerful advocate for this, about the fact that we need to have well-being, good well-being in schools. Do we really understand that over the last decade, the amount of physical education that our children undertake in schools has almost halved? And that's nonsense. And we also know that when they get home, they're not out playing around on their bike so much, they're on their phones doing social media, and it doesn't have to be physical education in the frightening sense of the word, the sports, it can be dancing madly in the gym, but we have to increase it. We also need to level up education and training so that children and young people get the best start in life. There's also the community perspective, which is really important. It's about rooting out the pockets of poverty. We need to readdress Flying Start because it's too much of a postcode lottery. We shouldn't be worried about people's addresses. We should be worried about their circumstances. We need to make sure that people are getting all the benefits that they're entitled to. Reen's touched on housing, really important. We're going to build 100,000 new homes over the next 10 years, including 40,000 social housing. Everybody needs a good home. I've been to see constituents who've got bubble wrap on their windows to try to keep their homes. But actually, I'll tell you the other thing people tend to forget about is we've got to have a good economy. A strong economy is also a determining factor in improving whole population health. And it kind of gets left off the scale a bit. And we've got a very, very strong economic manifesto, because without that strong economy, we can't really engineer success out of all of these other perspectives.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that. And Tracy, next question.
Thank you, Richard. The next question is, how would you invest in community nursing to deliver care closer to home?
Really, really important. And perhaps I'll start with Angela on this one.
Yeah, and in some ways we've already hashed around the answer a lot, isn't it? It is about the workforce, and it's about having the right workforce in the right place and having the right levels of training. And I think we can be more elastic as well about the roles and responsibilities of that workforce, because I've seen some amazing community initiatives out there. I've seen good use of the cluster funding to produce a community outcome where there's really good support and good community nursing. We need to look at where district nurses really sit in the heart of the community, because they're such a vital part of it. And yet, I've seen too often where district nurses are under the aegis of a health board, and actually it's the GP and the GP practice that needs them. If we look at our GP practice as one of our, if you like, anchor businesses, then our GP practices should have a huge number of qualified nurses there, nurse practitioners, specialists in chronic care, palliative care, outreach into the community, district nursing. We need also health professionals who do mental health, but also advice, social workers to get people the benefits they need, the housing that they need, the opportunities that they need. We can build this into a real sort of outpost, and that's what we've put in our manifesto. It's all about prevention, and prevention starts from the moment somebody is in their home, and that's where we've put the money into primary care, community care, mental health. We're not taking money out of secondary care, please don't get that message wrong, but we're putting a lot more of the proportion of it now through into primary and community. That's what we need to do, that's how we invest. But I come back to what I said at the beginning, the workforce.
Angela, 2/3 of care is delivered in the community and in the social care setting. And for me, what's important is that they are seeing patients that are much more seriously ill being cared for at home. And I was speaking to a nursing sister this afternoon who have got 80 patients on her caseload. She's starting work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she's not going home until 8 o'clock in the evening. Yeah. So I think that this matter really needs some urgent attention going forward.
And Richard, may I just come back on that? Because yeah. I agree with you 100%. But the benefit of that nurse doing what she is doing is incalculable.
Yes.
To the individual, because that person with chronic conditions or who's seriously ill is actually in a place of their choice. their beloved home. They're not in a residential facility. They're not in a hospital. So, you know, that is immeasurable in the benefit to that person, the benefit to society. Plus, we don't actually have the care home spaces for people, and we can't put people in our hospitals because that's not where they should be. So I think we all recognise, and I'm sure Reen will be saying the same thing, that we recognise the importance of having people within that care structure. But it all comes back down to that workforce. And it does make me angry because we've seen this bus come down the road for the past decade and there's just not been the action on it. And we're going to have to play a Scrabble up. And any political party that tells you that on day one of the next government, they're going to have a bunch more workforce is pie in the sky. We've got to put the groundwork in now, and get people, attract them in and get them into the right places.
Thank you, Angela. Reen?
Community nursing was perhaps my first experience of nursing. My grandmother was a matron, but she died before I was born. But her sister, Auntie Olwen, was a district nurse in Llangoed on Anglesey. And I remember, but her husband, Uncle No, was a journalist actually, so I actually followed him in terms of my profession. But my sister followed Auntie Olwen into healthcare. But I remember Auntie Olwen was clearly a rather important person within her community. And years later, when I first stood for election, I realised that most of my constituents in one part of the island had been brought into the world by Auntie Olwen, and she was held in hugely high regards by them. But what it tells me is that, you know, community nurses are and should be at the heart of our communities, as the name implies. There's something in the question that almost makes it sound as if, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we were able to have a few more, and what are you going to do about it? This, you know, community nursing should be really at the core of the workforce planning that we're trying to put in place, and, you know, commissioning more places for students to go into community nursing absolutely should be prioritised. And we were seeing over the past year, haven't we, that, you know, that there's such an enhanced role we now know that the community nurse can play, even more than we thought a year ago. You know, when more care at home, less direct contact within a surgery has been beneficial over the past year, and we can see that actually this could probably be beneficial for the longer term too. So let's get more staff through. Let's make this a core job within nursing, and, you know, if I were a nurse, I would imagine that that would be the line of work that I would perhaps like to go to, because, you know, you're a politician, you do it because you want to sort of talk to people within their communities. Let's make it an attractive job. Very, very briefly, I have a vision of a really well-financed roadshow that I'd like to establish as health minister, which would have two jobs. One, to teach our communities and young people in schools in particular about how to live healthier lifestyles, to do it in an exciting and approachable way, reaching out into all our communities. But secondly, to recruit people into care and health jobs. And I think community nursing surely should be one of the most attractive jobs that there are to sell to young boys and girls.
Thank you very much. I can see the passion in both of you. So that's greatly appreciated. Time has flown. We've got one final question before we finish. So over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Richard. As you know, there's been quite a few questions probably that come in tonight on pay. Pay is one of those ones that is really top of the agenda, even though we've covered a variety of questions and answers during the past 75 minutes. So I'd like to, if I could, I'd like to circle back to pay. And the final question is, do you support the Royal College of Nursing Fair Pay for Nursing campaign calling for 12.5% pay rise for nursing staff?
Thank you very much. And that's very specific. So Reen, you first.
Yeah, and I apologise for having preempted that one by referring specifically to that. And absolutely, I think that the demand by the RCN is a very fair and very, very, very clear demand too, because it recognises what has happened over a period of, well, it was a decade now, it's now a decade and more, where we have seen a degradation in pay going to nurses. I absolutely accept that equates to the 12.5%, and that UK government should be paying that money in order to make good for the money that has been lost out of nursing over that period. So absolutely, I have no hesitance in joining you in that call on UK government. The challenge then, of course, in Welsh government is to make sure that money, when it comes from UK government, if it does the right thing, goes to nurses who deserve that, and who, you know, we talk about people leaving their careers too early. Pay is one of the key determinants of how respected somebody feels within their profession, and we've got to get it right.
Thank you, Reen. Angela?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point about the 12.5%. Would I like to pay nurses, Tracy, 12.5% more? The answer is yes. Am I going to? The answer is no. And Reen has played a little bit fast and loose on this as well, because we've both said very clearly we would implement what the independent pay review people have said. And if they say that nurses should be paid 14%, that's what the Welsh Conservatives will pay. They say 8%, that's what we'll pay. They say 4%, that's what we'll pay. Because there's no point in having an independent pay review if you then decide just to ignore it completely. But what I would go back is to the comment I made before about the whole agenda for change and about the bulk of the profession that sits within it, which is nursing. I'm not clear, and I would like to talk more about how we actually create a contract for nursing, a nursing contract, which has its own pay uplift built into it. And that's where, so let's say, for example, the pay review might come out and say, you know, 6%, I'll just take 6%. We would implement that. But by looking at that, the issue of whether or not nursing should sit as it does at the moment within Agenda for Change, which is all about bringing the more lower paid people up to the minimum wage, and ensuring that's really sort of promulgated throughout the NHS and social care. If we were to do something far more creative with a nursing contract, like we have a doctor's contract, then that's where we can make the big leap that needs to be made. Because there's no doubt about it, over the years, the nursing pay has fallen back.
Okay, well, thank you both very much indeed. Can I thank the audience for all the very interesting questions that we had tonight, and throughout all the hustings, and the candidates, and both Reen and Angela have been on quite a few of the hustings, so we appreciate your responses to the questions. What we're going to do now, we're going to give both Reen and Angela 1 minute to actually make some closing remarks. And so I'll start with Angela.
Just in case I haven't already mentioned it this evening, I want to say one word to you: workforce. That is the most important thing that has to be addressed. And it doesn't matter whether we're looking at, you know, a specialist in some, you know, area, some rare disease that we know very little about, or whether we're talking about trying to bolster our domiciliary care workforce, whoever it is, we do not have enough people in health and social care, enough of our workforce. We are going to be creating training places. We're going to be starting apprenticeship schemes in nursing and in care. We're going to be ensuring that HE, higher education and further education are on board. It is vital. The second bit that we are also very committed to is prevention, which is all about primary community mental health, stopping people from getting so sick that they have to go into a hospital. But none of that works without people. and it's people we need. And I want to thank Richard, if I may, at this point, the people we do have in health and social care. I don't know who's watching. I don't know how many of you are watching. You know, I'm not after your vote. I don't care, because what I want to say to you is you've been amazing. And in this last year, you've helped hold our nation together. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Thank you.
And thank you, Angela. Thank you very much. Reen?
Yeah, and it's been pleasure working opposite you. Been a pleasure working opposite you as well, Angela. And I wish you well in future, if this is the last Hustings that we do together. Gai ddiolch unwaith eto i'r RCN am nid yn unig am y digwyddiad yma heno, ond am y cydweithio dwi wirioneddol wedi mwynhau efo chi dros y cyfnod diweddar, a gymaint dwi wedi ddysgu ganddo chi hefyd. A diolch i bawb sydd wedi gofyn cwestiynau a bod yn rhan o heno. We face a rebuilding period. As I said at the start, we are facing a period where we can't just bring things back as they were. Angela and I have argued long and hard that things weren't good enough as they were anyway, for patients or for staff. We need to build something that is better. We need to build something that is, above all, I think, more sustainable. And I am looking forward to hopefully having the chance to do that, you know, for the patients and for the staff and for nurses, but also to do it with the patients and with you as nurses, because as politicians we are conduits. We are ones that are put in the privileged position of being able to implement good ideas, and they come from you, and you tell me what is fair, what is right, and it'll be my job to try to make sure that we do have that fair health and care landscape in Wales that gets rid of inequalities and that provides for the workforce the sustainability that you need to be able to do the job that you've been trained to do.
Thank you very much, both of you, for a really interesting National Hustings, and I want to thank the audience for their participation as well. It's only 2 weeks to the elections, so we would encourage everybody to go out and vote on our manifesto. Okay, it is vote for nursing, and I know that we have all our demands within the manifesto we have shared with all the political parties. So thank you for the discussions that we've had over the last 6 Hustings. Can I now encourage everyone to follow the RCN Facebook and Twitter pages for more news on Vote for Nursing, our 221 manifesto asks within the Hustings events. And finally, I want to introduce our closing song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, by Only Boys Aloud and by Sophie Evans. Thank you very much.
When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble all around, heaven opens a magic way. When all the
sing a lullaby. High somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Ooh, someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, high above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, or somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops, high above the chimney tops. That's where